Recently, something totally crazy happened to me, and it almost ruined my reputation at school. In fact, it almost ruined my life because I acted like such a fool. It all started when we got a new science teacher. But let me start from the beginning. I absolutely love science, and ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved to carry out different kinds of experiments. So it comes as no surprise to anyone that my fave class at school is science, and that I'm planning to study to become a scientist. None of my friends really care about science. They're way more into fashion and movies and stuff. So sometimes it gets a bit lonely as I don't have anyone to share my passion with. Our science teacher, Mr. Reynolds, just retired, and so I was panicking at who our new teacher would be. Seeing as it's my best class, I was hoping for someone good. The next day, I walked into class and our new teacher was standing at the front of the room. He looked so young, and yet, at the same time, kind of like maybe he could be my dad's age. He looked a bit sad, actually, and kept his head down. But then it was time to take the register, and as he said my name, and I replied, "Here," his gaze lingered on me. He didn't stop staring for a good few seconds, and I could feel myself blushing. I mean, he was kind of good-looking. He asked us to introduce ourselves and to tell him our favorite thing about science. He introduced himself as Mr. Smith, and he smiled a lot when I told him how much I loved science and wanted to be a scientist when I graduated. A few of the boys in our class started sniggering, and I heard them whispering, "Lily, the teacher's pet." I just ignored them, though, but seriously, Mr. Smith was looking at me a lot. I knew it wasn't just my imagination. That night, I found myself thinking about him. I wondered if he had a wife and what his favorite food was. I even dreamt about him that night. The next morning, I bumped into him on the way to class, and he said, "Good morning, Lily." I smiled. I couldn't believe he'd remembered my name. We didn't have science that day, but at the end of the day, I saw him again, and he waved at me with a big grin on his face. I was with my friend Josie, and she looked at me with her eyebrows raised and said, looks like someone's got a bit of a crush on you, Lily." I nudged her and said, "Oh, shut up, Josie." But inside, my heart started beating faster. The next day when I got to science class, there was a book on my desk with a note inside that said, "I think you'll love this, Lily." There was even a smiley face next to it. I knew it was from Mr. Smith, and I read that book so quickly. Then, when I returned it, I left a note inside too. We carried on in this way for a few weeks, and then one Friday after class, he asked me to stay behind for a quick word. I started shaking. What did he want? He looked at me and asked if I'd like to join him for the annual science exhibition at the convention center. He said he had a spare ticket and he thought maybe I'd be interested. I had already made plans with Josie, but I told him I'd be there, and thank you so much. That night, I spent hours in front of the mirror trying on different outfits. I couldn't believe Mr. Smith had invited me on a date with him. I mean, it was a date, right? I barely slept that night, and the next morning I rushed out to meet him. I got there early so that I'd make a good impression. The whole bus ride there, I was picturing us walking around the fair hand in hand and imagining us opening our own science museum together one day. I saw our whole life together flash before my eyes, and it just made me feel so happy. He was a little late, but I didn't mind. When he saw me, his eyes brightened and he jogged towards me. He even touched my shoulder as he apologized for keeping me waiting. We walked in and started exploring. The exhibition was incredible. After wandering around for about 30 minutes, he said he wanted to introduce me to someone. I was expecting it to be a college professor or some renowned scientist friend of his, but I could never have been prepared for what happened next. "Lily, this is my wife Emily." My heart sank. He was married. I mean, of course he was. But then why had he invited me here? When Emily saw me, her eyes went wide and she started sobbing. I felt terrible. Was she about to break up with her husband? But then suddenly she was standing up and hugging me and saying, "I can't believe it." I was so confused. Then she told me that I was the spitting image of their daughter, who had sadly passed away a few years ago. And then it all made sense to me. Mr. Smith didn't have a crush on me. I just reminded him of his daughter. I was so embarrassed. Here I was, thinking I was on a date with my teacher, when actually he just missed his daughter so much and had felt a bond with me because I reminded him of her. They asked me to join them for lunch, but I told them I had to go as Josie was waiting for me. I wanted the ground to swallow me up. I had made such a fool of myself. Mr. Smith stopped leaving me books on my desk, and things quickly went back to normal. I still wanted to become a scientist, but after that incident, I decided it's probably best if I stick to boys my own age. And maybe I shouldn't make assumptions so quickly.